The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. Wealth Builders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 136 of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for Wealth Builders, and I'm joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, here we are. And following on from last week's episode, 135, and we revisited the debits process. So 6 ways to reduce your outgoings. And we added a slight twist. So we changed the S, which had previously been support costs, to stock market fees, and had some good feedback on that this week.
And quite right too. You know, I think we were quite appropriately judging the stock market piece. It was interesting because I was reading an article actually, quite opposite just this week, which said institutional investors, in other words, people like me, people who are fund managers and so on, they pay so little for their access to the market, and that the retail investor, usually our listeners, are paying 300%, 3 times more than the institutional investor. Why? Because they can. Why? Because it pays for marketing and it pays for excessive profits. That's not right. And, 95% of the IFA population take their final salary pensions if they've got them, and they use them for themselves. But only 5% do they recommend other people move. So feels a little bit like what's going on in the UK government right now. One rule for you and one rule for me. While I'd rarely get political, I'm not going to comment about parties in Downing Street. I am saying, though, that there needs to be a change to how retail customers are downtrodden in terms of their fees. And I'm so pleased that we are the disruptor in the middle, trying to do something about that. And we're going to focus on that in this year. And by the way, talking about disruptors in the middle, we've got a brilliant guest today who I think calls himself Hickey in the middle. More about what Hickey actually means, a little bit of new language for us all. And as we're wealth builders here by nature, we recognize that there's always a bit of new language to learn, Chris, isn't there? There's always something new to learn. And you're in for a treat today because you're going to learn a bunch.
That's it. Yes. Well, you should be familiar, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, that we've got our recurring revenue roadmap. That's our process that helps our members move from a place of financial insecurity through to financial independence. And of course, a key part of that is understanding the 7 pillars of wealth, 7 different asset classes that you can use to generate recurring income in your life every month. And today we're really focused around pillar number 4, which is the property portfolio pillar.
Or are we?
Yes, although our guest actually comes from a business background, pillar 5. And interesting, as we'll hear from Mr. Luke Spikes today, the founder of Hickey House, how he's taken those 35 plus years of business experience and pivoted really into the property world and very successfully too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and listen out for all the lessons that Luke just dispenses in a rapid style. I mean, it's almost, if you want to hear an entrepreneur in action, if you want to feel and hear the cogs literally turning, and you can hear the click, 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 click of the brain making distinctions and differences to do better for his customers and better for his investors and better for himself. I don't think I've heard a better example of that entrepreneurism in action than the interview you did with Luke. And I've got to say, Chris, you did an outstanding job pulling out those lessons. So well done you.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's not wait around any longer. Let's head on over to our conversation with Mr. Luke Spikes. Luke, welcome to Wealth Talk today.
Well, Christian, it's a delight to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Luke. And today we're talking about, reinventing retail and how you're driving value from marginal retail space that succumbed to the juggernaut that is online shopping. So looking forward to hearing about that. But before we do that, would you mind just introducing yourself for our listeners who perhaps have not come across you before?
No, happy to. And I think the thing that I usually preface any introduction with is I'm not a property person. And that might sound a bit unusual when actually you're spending another half an hour talking about property. But the reality is, I think from where I come has given me a distinct advantage. I am a business person. This is startup number 7. I'm in 35 years building businesses from the ground up. But the first 6 businesses were all technology businesses. And therefore, you're about as unconnected to the world of property as it's likely to or possible to get, and very different characteristics as the way you operate in those environments. But what I learned as I ended up in the world of property, that was all of the lessons, the vast majority of the things I learned were equally applicable if what you did was to focus on property as a market where there were customers and those customers had needs, and if you could deliver against those needs better, faster, more effectively than competing alternatives, you'd make progress. In other words, that's what you do in business. So although I am not from property, I do think being not from property is an advantage because we look at the market and the world of property very differently from most.
And it was only really a few years back, 2017, I believe, that you kind of entered the world of property. And what was it that made you decide at that point that was the right time for you?
Accident. Genuinely an accident. And yes, it is we are relatively young. And I think Hickey House is one of those brands, because we put a lot of effort into building a brand and creating awareness in and around what we were doing. A lot of people assume we've been around forever. Well, actually, we haven't. What we've accomplished has been accomplished in a relatively short order. I found myself in the world of property by accident because I had a property that I didn't know what to do with. Like a lot of folk, kids, older children, grown up, left home, bigger house than you need. Question mark, what do we do with this? And I had just sold my business. I was now working for my last business. I was working for a large corporation now. I'd collected some cash. So I was sort of sitting there. And on the one hand, I had this asset, this property that's the family home that we'd owned for quite some while that was too big for our needs. On the other hand, I had some capital, some cash, thinking, well, what do I do next once I have done my earn out with this large corporation? Speaking to my wife, she didn't want me to do anything at all because she was fed up with the whole world of startups and all the pain that brings with it, not just for you, but for everyone else in and around. And I said, I know what I'll do. I'll just buy some books. In other words, my natural instinct is to intellectually curious, get to know something about property. So I bought some books, and one of those was Simon Zucchi's book, Property Magic. Picked it up, didn't put it down, and thought, wow, there's some really interesting ideas in there that have started my brain sparking on what I might do. And in parallel with that, I had conversations with my children about how difficult it was for them as young adults, young professionals, young adults, making their way in the world to find good quality accommodation that met their needs as they perceive their needs to be today. And classic entrepreneur going, hang on a minute, there's loads of properties, I hear this all the time, there's loads of properties, there's loads of landlords. How come you can't find what you say you want and need? What is it you want to need? So I spent time then listening to them about what they felt they needed. And a bit of scratching around. It's clear that there was a gap in the market, let's call it that. And so Hickey House was effectively born out of that mix of things. And the next thing I know, I'm looking for more education. I go on to Simon's website, having looked at the book, and there's an accelerator. I'm on the accelerator, and halfway through the accelerator, which is a 3-day course, I put my hand in the air and said, this is intriguing enough and exciting enough, and I can see opportunity. I'm going to sign up for the 12-month program. And get myself educated. So at least whilst I know how to build businesses, execute at scale, international, all that sort of good stuff, knew nothing about property, the technicalities of property. In fact, that's where I met Kevin, of course. So I went on the program and I begin to learn all of these things, and up pops WealthBuilders, and starting to talk about how I could use my SaaS more creatively. And at that point, I hadn't even imagined I could use it, because I was one of those sort of fairly typical entrepreneurs, I think, who look at pensions as a bit of a pain in the arse, a bit of a ball ache. It's like, what am I going to do with this? I'm not sure I know what to do with this. And actually, it was Kevin then, and the conversations I had with WealthBuilders effectively helped unlock that as an asset that I now have been able to deploy that in the business, which has accelerated the growth of Hickey House from that point. So that's the long-winded answer to your very simple, apparently, question as to how I got started in property.
Well, no, it's very interesting, and love to hear more about how you've used your SaaS as we progress. So I guess coming to the name then. So obviously, it's a very unique name. And Hickey House. So perhaps just spell it out for those that don't know, Luke, and tell us what's the origins of the name.
Yeah, it's having a memorable name is an important part of any business building, any brand, in my opinion. If you truly are going to create something that has and occupies a position on everyone's mental shelf, then you've got to put a bit of effort into that name. You can't just have some long random name of words, list of words as your name. So these days, it's not about whether the limited company is available; it's whether the URL is available, right? So I have a little science, I suppose, but on how when I'm starting to look for a new name for a business or a product or a brand, which is to try and find short, memorable names on the internet. Now, you have to be creative. And so what I was doing was I combined two languages together to create a unique word that has never existed, in the hope that no one else has spotted it, so that when I type it into GoDaddy, it would be available. I mean, that's as simple as where I started. And so I started down the path of taking, the Finnish for comfortable and the Urdu for house, stitch them together and see if I had a word, type it into GoDaddy, and if the .com and everything was available, that's a candidate. I need a list of 50. 50 of them, all of which were not quite right. And then one day I was going, hygge. So if you're familiar with the Danish term hygge, which is spelled Hygge, there's no real literal translation in English, but it broadly means comfortable. So it's describing the environment as being a comfortable, warm, safe place. Think of it like that. Hygge and house. Well, Hickey would be how we would pronounce it in England. Let's misspell it, like Hickey in the middle, Piggy in the middle. So I went Hickey, Higgi. House, let's try and make it feel a bit continental European. Let's throw in the German for house, Haus, not House. Stuck it together, typed it into Google, available. And I went, Hickey. And I just remember shouting through to Delith, who was in the other room. Hickey House, she said, that's the one. And I just, and immediately purchased all of the URLs, all of the .coms, the .nets, all the various variants. And Hickey House was born. And so it's proven, it is memorable. People do know it. It does actually have meaning. So hygge and house, it has appropriate context in the name. So I think we were a bit lucky. But we went through a systematic process that arrived at the end result, and that was the end result. Yeah,
and of course your properties have a very unique look and feel, Luke. And I know our focus today conversation is really where you're moving towards now, which is reinventing retail. But I think really good to understand what the foundations of the business are. And for someone who doesn't know what a Hickey House property looks like, how can you best describe that?
But I think wherever we're going and wherever we've been, they're all connected. So it is a good point. So the aesthetic, let's describe it as that. The way the Hickey House looks has been very carefully contrived. In fact, contrive's the wrong word. Considered, and it started out with a brief for our thinking that said New York loft meets Danish with a dash of Tokyo for installation and application of small space living. So that's what we started with. And we said, what does that look like? And after a degree of iteration between myself, my sister, a couple of creatives, and one or two other members of the team, we ended up defining the look that has become the Hickey House look, which I would describe as sort of industrial, upcycled, quirky, colourful, because there's a little bit of colourful, but actually designed around the target market we were seeking to serve general interest. Something instantly Instagrammable, for example, right? So very cool, deemed stylish by the audience we were seeking to. So that was the original aesthetic. What we then proceeded to do was to define that as systematically as we could in terms of what does that mean in terms of the furniture we put into place, the flooring, all the finishes. Went and executed that, and then each time we've executed it subsequently, we've stuck to the core principles, but improved or innovated slightly each time. So if you looked at it today compared to what it was 5 years ago, it is different, but it's definitely connected. And as we started to think about our position in the world, I went, well, why does everyone run about worrying about service accommodation and HMOs? Those to me make no difference, none whatsoever. From the customer's perspective, it's a place to stay. The difference is you stay for 1 day or 1 year or longer. So why would they be any different? Why would you confuse the customer with this is service accommodation, this is rent? Forget all of that. The focus now is on the customer, what the customer sees and perceives. So the aesthetic was designed around what we felt would attract our customer, but also at the same time to be sufficiently distinctive so that if you walked into one, even if I hadn't told you, you'd know it was a Hickey house. And I think to a lesser or greater extent, we've accomplished that. And we will continue with this, by the way. So it just because we are now incorporating some new activities and new directions into what we're doing does not mean it will suddenly be a completely new look and feel. In fact, quite the reverse. We're incorporating new things in because we think that's the right way to do it. But they are incorporated in, not different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because obviously with all of your business background, Luke, and we know that any business really, it needs a proof of concept, right? So you need to make sure that what you think is wanted is actually wanted by the customer. So with that first property, I mean, did you go into that feeling confident? Yes, we've got a product here that we know the market is demanding?
No. No, completely the opposite. It was like, well, we've got no idea. Everyone was telling us that we were mad because our first property was in Swansea, and Swansea. Actually, I love Swansea. It's a really interesting place. But we were told as we arrived that it was where ambition went to die. I think is what Dylan Thomas said about it, or someone said about it. So, is this really the place to put down a high-end, highly specified, community-centric new model for shared living, co-living as we now refer to it? Maybe not. And all the local landlords and investors are going, you're going to do what? Spend a ton of money more than they would spend on a property. So actually we entered it with some degree of trepidation that we could be wrong. This might not work. We did it. The rooms were let not within a week at record rents, by the way. And we went, we were right. There is a thing, and that was the first one. We did with our own money, by the way. We did have some investors involved, but I was effectively underwriting it all, taking all the risk, which I felt was the right thing to do. We did the first one, and now as they say, we continue to knock them out, and the same thing happens every time. I mean, the last one we had. We started the marketing before we had finished, which is customary because we've got models and other things from other properties. We sold 7 rooms without a single viewing 4 weeks before the building was even finished at record rents again. So so the brand, the history, the aesthetic, and all the things we use to support that are now helping us drive the model forward in terms of the income and some of the operating metrics as well. Yeah,
and I'd encourage anyone listening to head to the Hickey House website, have a look, because you'll see the images straight away, and get a really good feeling for what the properties look like.
Just don't copy it. No, I'm kidding. We have. It's amazing how you see lots of. So we were one of the first. I think we may even been the first to have used bright colours and paint window reveals. There were a few things that we did that people went, "Oh, that's an unusual way to do it," and now people do that. But I would always say I can look at something, so that's not a Hickey house. You can go into something, it's not a Hickey house. Just because you paint the windows orange or use the same scaff headboard as we do doesn't make it Hickey house, because, and an important point just to flesh out a little bit on the question, there's an aesthetic, but there's also a couple of other things that are really important. How it looks is important, how it feels is important, and how it feels is not just about the space, but it's also about what you do to foster and create community. So how you gather, who you have in the house will make a difference. So how you go through the process of recruiting your housemate. We don't call them tenants, by the way, because I think that's abusive, right? It's tenant landlord somehow sets the wrong tone. It's their housemates, they are customers. They're giving us money each month for a service. We have to deliver that service at a level that meets or exceeds their expectations. Very different way of thinking about it. But the community is about who is in the house, but it's also what you do when they're in the house. And that's partly design as well. So it's not just how it looks, it's also how you organize the space makes a big difference. The opportunity to gather, to bump into one another as a group of strangers, ostensibly, when they arrive, and they do end up emerging friends. There's no question about it. So there's a layer of service that often gets missed by most investors, which is a little bit of investment of time and effort, but it produces extraordinary returns in terms of the rates people are prepared to pay, how quickly you can let the units, rooms, how long people stay, whether you have voids or not, your operating costs are lower. There's a whole bunch of real sensible reasons as to why investing a little bit of time and effort into let's call it the service layer that sits on top of the asset is an important and sensible thing to do. Yeah, I do get a lot of folk who come to me and say, do I really need to spend that much money and that much effort and that much time? His answer is, well, no. But if on the other hand, you want to produce record rents at 50% higher than market average, you want voids of 0%, you want to sell every room without a viewing, and you want 100% conversion, which is what we effectively got in the last property. If you would like all of those things, yes, do what I'm doing. If you don't want that, then don't do that. It's entirely up to you, you know?
And how many housemates typically will be in one of the properties, Luke?
Well, so they are smaller. They're 5, 7, 6s, 10s, that sort of size. Although I've just agreed terms, despite us going on in a moment to talk about where we're headed, I've just agreed terms on a building yesterday, which will be our first 40-bed co-living unit. Okay, so scale is important in terms of financial returns, but also that was always where our ambition was. How do you take a large commercial building and convert it into a 25, 30, 40, 50 bed, 150 bed co-living unit? That's where we're headed.
Yeah. I mean, you joked a moment ago about not copying, but, wealth building is all about collaboration. And I understand you have an investor program now that enables other people to collaborate with Hickey House. So maybe just let people know a little bit about that, if you don't mind, Luke. No,
I'm happy to, because so up until now, most of the work that we've done for our own account and at our own risk. So although we would borrow money and we would involve investors, it would be very typical arm's length term loans and those sorts of things. So we're making money for other people, but it was always you're in for a short period of time. And 18 months or so ago, I started thinking about how we might adjust what we do to more effectively involve others. Now, I'm an entrepreneur, many years standing. I love working with entrepreneurs, as it happens. I accidentally started mentoring, and that was genuinely accidental. And I gathered a few people who thought I could help them, and then turns out I could. And I really enjoyed that. And effectively out of that, and the strength of the Hickey House brand and the fact we've sort of systematized how we go about doing what we do, led me to conclude that the best thing for us to do right now to achieve our goals in terms of numbers and scale was to start effectively collaborating with others. In other words, we've done the proving, if you want. We've got the model. We've got the way we operate. I've got the team. Now what we should do is to grow more quickly towards our 10,000 units in 10 years, by the way. That's the objective. I need to work with other people. And so conceived of a program which is a sort of business partner, investor partner program, whereby not only can you participate in deals that we do, so there's an element of joint venture now, so you can participate in deals that we do. We will also help and support our partner in building their own portfolio of Hickey House properties too, independent of us. And they can use our services. We might operate them on their behalf, depending on what they're wanting to accomplish. So we created this program where if you have capital and you're wanting to commit that capital to produce a return, and you are interested in Hickey House and our model, then now what you can do is work with me, the Team Hickey, and we have a program where you can sign up for the program. Yes, there's a bit of money involved ourselves because we've got costs that we incur, but you become a partner of mine. You work with me, you participate in our deal flow. I mentor and support towards your business ambitions, whatever it is you want to do. We even will help organise the senior debt, the money supplemental to your own equity investment, to help fund and finance stuff, and on it goes. So I'm sort of looking now for a few. We have 4 already, by the way. So there are some already. We're starting to gather a little bit of momentum and folk starting to join us. Looking for just a small number more of individuals who are interested in really working closely with me and the team. And then we can, help you accomplish your own objectives, but at the same time accomplish ours. So it's important to bear in mind that this is a mutually beneficial thing. I've got a big goal that I'd like to accomplish. I'm not going to do that on my own. I need help, support and involvement of others. And this is a creative way for us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it sounds fantastic, Luke. So 2020 comes along, we know.
Yes.
So how did this affect what you were doing, Luke? And how has that then sort of shifted the course for you in terms of your outlook?
Well, our co-living business was fine. In fact, we were all a little nervous early on that our young professional market would all, disappear home to mum and dad, and we'd have voids and vacancies. It didn't turn out to be that case at all. We put a little bit more extra effort into care and support. We put microwaves and all sorts of stuff in, and we did all the things that lots of other folk did too, just to make sure that our customer was looked after, and that helped. So really solid. In fact, we didn't lose a single day's rent throughout the entire period on our co-living businesses. The service accommodation business, which is the other business we have, which is based in Bristol, which is a mix of one beds, studios, we've got a couple of 2 beds, some houses, was hammered, right? As you might reasonably expect. So we had to pivot real hard and real fast early on. All the small stuff we switched to ASTs, and we just got creative with the houses as to how we would support people in the market who were eligible to rent, and there were a few. So we in fact, we had at one point, for the bulk of lockdown 1 and possibly even 2, maybe into 3, we had a group of guys who were in Bristol repairing big buildings in the wake of Grenfell. They were fire folk, a crew of 17 guys that needed housing. All deemed eligible to continue to work through lockdowns because of the nature of what they were doing. I met the boss. The boss said, can you help me with 17? I just so happened to had 17 rooms. So we had all our properties effectively 100% occupied by switching quickly to, right, we'll focus on the contractors. Weekends were a washout, of course. Our typical leisure guests are gone, wasn't allowed to rent. But we were doing well enough with our mix of contractors and single lets, just to sort of bumble along and crash on through, I suppose. And we lost a little bit of money, but we did okay by pivoting that way. What then towards the tail end, as we see, everyone went, well, okay, the world continues on, and we're going to have to deal with it at some point. So we can't just sit there and stop. We continued to deliver our co-living buildings, continued to work through, as it were. We were allowed. We had to adjust the way we did it, of course, but we were looking for more purchases. And what I found was it was becoming increasingly difficult to purchase the type of asset that we had been purchasing, because there were lots of people. I don't know whether they'd seen a video somewhere about you can buy a house for £1 and HMOs are the thing to buy, but prices just went silly. I mean, people were paying way too much money. And we're very financially disciplined. So of course, if someone's going to bid the price up to beyond what that asset is worth, and I'm not going to make the returns I would need to make, I'm just not going to chase it. So that was happening too often for us to really achieve our longer term ambition. I couldn't buy enough properties, in other words, because people were popping up and paying silly money for them. So we went, okay, what do you do in that circumstance if you're a business? Well, what you do is you look for alternative directions in which you might travel to continue the momentum. And I happened to be offered a building in 2020, middle of 2020, June 2020. So we weren't far into the lockdowns and all the trouble that we subsequently had. And it was a retail building, and it was right in the heart of Bristol. For those of you who know Bristol, the old city, beautiful Georgian building, grade 1 and 2 star buildings listed in and around it, high traffic area, right in the heart of the city. And it was an off-market deal. Got a call from the agent. I think I've got one for you. And I went to have a look at it. And I saw it on Wednesday. I bought it on Friday. It was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And the reason I bought it was because although it was a retail building, and an empty retail building that had previously had a building society actually occupy the retail space. And what happened in November, a bit unlucky for the vendor, I suppose, November 2019, the 17-year lease came to an end. And the building society said, sorry, we don't need retail space anymore. And it was empty. They did it a little bit as to what they should do with it. Of course, March comes along, lockdown happens, and they panicked. What we're going to do, we've got an empty retail building. The offices above are empty. We've got no income coming in. We've got costs going out. What do? We've got to sell it. And I was able to buy that building. So they paid $495,000 for it 17 years ago. I paid $400,000 for it in the middle of 2020. And that got me thinking. I went, hang on a minute. If the world is running from the high street, maybe there's value to be had in finding creative ways to repurpose these buildings that would add more value. So we put a lot of thought before we bought it. In the few days before we bought it, we thought, okay, we'll take our hospitality experience, we'll take our co-living experience, we'll effectively transform all of that, and what we will do is we'll convert the upper stories into an apart hotel, because that delivers higher density. This was the thinking. And if it's C1 class, so in other words, it's a commercial to commercial, effectively, offices in this case to commercial to C1 apart hotel, we wouldn't have to worry about space standards. We could deliver the density that we want to deliver that makes it economically viable and work. And then what we're going to do with the retail space? Then we said, well, we'll revisit our original objective, which was co-working. So a combination of all of these, my thought, were all of these people who've been forced to work from home, who are now fed up, tripping over dogs, cats, wives, husbands, working in cupboards, closets, and generally fed up with this, what felt like an exciting and interesting thing to be doing, at least for a few months, now is a pain in the backside, and will want the other human beings. We are social animals by our nature. So we thought, if we are able to reinvent retail premises on high streets, which are accessible to folk who just want a desk and to hang out with a bunch of folk a bit like them, then this is the right time for us to revisit co-working. And the Hickey Hub was born. So in essence, what we have conceived of at that point was, I won't call them distressed assets, but good value retail buildings that others are scratching their heads wondering what to do with it. As they're running, we're going back towards it, acquire those assets and have a product to put into it. So the upper stories would be an apart hotel, studio-based, and then the what would have been retail would be converted into these desk-based Hickey hubs, which are for local entrepreneurs, anyone really who wants to get out of the home and have a desk and a place from which to work that suits work, would sit underneath. And that's how this sort of hybrid apart hotel co-working model was born. Anyway, literally a few weeks later, I got a call from another agent. Cardiff is another city we're interested in. And I took control of another one, which is well on its way. In fact, this month, we'll get planning permission for 16 lofts, studios, and 45 desks. And it's right smack in the middle of Cardiff. It's 200 metres from the station, a couple of hundred metres from the new BBC headquarters. It's right in front of the St David's shopping centre. I mean, it's a perfect location, and we got a very good deal on the asset when one considers what it will be worth when we do what we do with it. And then I got another call. So this is how these things happen. And it was another agent of ours, friend of ours, who was operating in Cardiff too, and said, "I think you need to come and talk to this individual, the owner of this building. He's just got planning permission to convert this hotel into 3 flats." I said, "Well, I'm not really interested in 3 flats. I mean, that's not our thing, really." He said, "Oh, come along. He's an interesting guy. Have a chat with him anyway." Anyway, long story short, later we took purchase lease option on a 7-bed, 7-bath boutique hotel in Cardiff Bay, because it has a massive car park, which is part of the deal, upon which we think we can build a 21-unit apart hotel, a 30-bed a 30-desk co-working unit, and convert the original hotel into a 10-bed, 10-bath co-living. So we'll have our first hybrid co-living, part hotel, co-working, all in one physical site. So Bal and I'm going, hang on a minute. So it's really tough over here. People are paying too much for these assets. And yet in this space, when we're talking about retail assets, hotels, I'm finding real value because we have a product that we can put into these that makes them more valuable than they are at present. And that's effectively how our thinking evolved. And we then said, you know what? This needs to become our strategic direction. So this whole hospitality business, we've got 5 years experience doing it anyway. Reinventing retail, creating these extraordinary Hickey House apart hotels and co-working hybrid hubs on Britain's high streets has become our strategic focus from this point forward. Yeah,
it's so exciting, and I just want to dig into some of the creativity, Luke. As an entrepreneur of so many years, you can see the way your brain works here. And how did you go about restructuring? So, did you set Hickey Hubs as a separate company? You also mentioned purchase lease option there. So, for anyone perhaps not familiar with that term, can you explain the benefit of using that?
One of the other things I learned through the mastermind program, and in fact, in conversations with Kevin in the early days, was control assets. You can control assets and you don't have to own them. And so I can mitigate and manage risk by taking options on buildings subject to planning. So that's typically what we would do. We would normally not acquire an asset unless that asset very clearly we were allowed to do what we wanted to do with it. If we didn't, because it needed planning permission, then we would sign an option on the building to buy it subject to securing planning. So that's a very typical way for us to approach it. And that's just there's one thing being driven and creative and wanting to grow, but there's also managing risk as you do it. So this is a way of doing that. We don't get caught with a building that we can't then do what we want to do with it, and we're struggling to flip it on. So that's part. So that's a purchase option. So just the right to buy it, but not the obligation if you achieve something. Now, the purchase lease option is where we are effectively not only taking the option to purchase it, but we're also operating the building. So in this particular case, we took on the hotel on a purchase lease option, subject to planning, but also have taken a 5-year lease on the building because that building is now being folded into what we call our milestone events business, our groups of young people on weekends. And so we're actually generating, in fact, it's generating about 5,000-6,000 of net cash per month as an asset that we're actually operating as part of our business. In addition, we're going to use that capital to fund the planning permission, all the drawings and everything else that we're going to need. Once we get planning permission, we'll execute our option to buy it at the prices agreed at the beginning of the contract. That's effectively what a purchase lease option is. So it allows us to generate, and I did genuinely pay £1. Right, so it is classically one of those buy a building for £1, which is the consideration for the lease contract, and so that's what that is. And so we will always use tools or techniques like that to control assets for as little cash as possible and as low as risk as possible. But that's what those are.
Now, let's come on to how you've used your pension. You mentioned this at the beginning. This was obviously the first connection with Wealth Builders and with Kevin, understanding that you have got a pension from previous life and you're now using that in property. So how has, and you've created a SSAS pension, how has that, allowed you to be even more creative and build more wealth, Luke?
Well, in the first instance, we did what everyone does. So we took half of it, loaned it to other developers, and we took half of it and did the loan back thing. So we've done the sort of the basics, if you like. But what I actually realized as we started to shift our direction was that with residential, as anyone knows who's got SSAS, residential is challenging. There are issues that surround it and risks that you're taking by definition. If you switch to commercial, and bear in mind what we're doing is now commercial to commercial. We're not doing commercial residential, we're doing commercial to commercial. It means that a pension, your SSAS can own it directly, can own shares in it. There's a lot more flexibility to how you and 100% of your pension can be directed towards this effort. So what it's allowed me to do is to rethink how I'm using my own SSAS. And so, for example, with our building in Clare Street, which is 3 months away from completion, it'll have upper stories will be a part hotel, and the Hickey hub below will be title split. So we'll create 2 assets out of the one. And my pension is going to purchase the Hickey hub directly. So it will own the Hickey hub, but it will do it on a guaranteed rent from the operating company. So now I bought an asset that's producing income. We're managing both sides as it happens because we're also the operating company as well. I've suddenly found a model that gives me a tremendous amount of flexibility as to how, and with genuine, with inside the rules, as to how I help drive my own business. So I think although we did everything that you're supposed to do early on, this feels to me almost like an unleashing of the potential, because now there are no half measures. I can use my pension. Well, it follows by definition, then so can our collaborators and joint venture partners can do the same thing. So as long as we stick to our C1, which is the use class for apart hotels effectively, commercial, and it varies depending on which, whether in Wales or England or Scotland, but the class E, let's call it for the UK, for the office, retail, or commercial. So suddenly this billions of pounds locked up in folks' pensions, with a lot of us sitting there going, what am I going to do with this to make a decent return, can be unlocked. And that's really where SSAS comes to the fore for us now.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Luke. So, obviously you're a man who sets goals, has a vision. In the next 5 years, where would you, obviously you've got the target of 10,000. Where do you see things in 5 years for yourself, Luke?
Well, I'm well on the way to 50% of my objective, because it's 10,000 in 10 years. Who knows? I mean, it's the honest answer. I think the key thing is to identify a market segment in which you can operate, where you can make good and sensible returns, that has legs. You can see some, and then actively participate in it. If you'd have asked me 3 years ago, did I see ourselves reinventing the high street? And the answer was, well, no. So I think opportunities will emerge to take our model, which is ultimately all about making better use of buildings and properties than is currently the case. So I suspect at the back of my mind is we will end up creating small space living that actually allows the people who can't afford to buy properties the ability to buy properties. So I see micro apartments and us shifting from doing stuff that we rent to doing stuff that we actually sell, but creating product that allows what I would call the Hickey in the middle, right? So the young person who's doing well enough not to need or be entitled to any governmental support, but not earning enough money to have accumulated much of a deposit to be able to buy anything. They're sort of stuck, they're stuck. It's like, well, how can we create product or service, or create a product for them? So at the back of my mind, it's like, can we solve that problem of small micro apartments for sale to young people to get them on the ladder? Is probably where you'll see us active in a few years' time. But who knows? There could be another opportunity or problem that pops up that we seek to solve.
That's what keeps it exciting, isn't it?
Indeed, it does.
We love what you're doing, Luke, and we're so pleased to have you shared that with our listeners today. So thank you very much, and all the best of luck.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Chris. Take care.
Okay, lots of lessons there, I think, which we can dissect and pull out, Kevin. But before we do that, let's head on over to Trustpilot and scroll through some of our reviews from the last 7 days. And I'm going to read one out from Ranjit. And Ranjit says, a huge thank you to Kevin Whelan, Paul Brooks, and the Empowered Wealth Builders teams for finally getting my old pension transferred into my new SSAS. I took 4 years doing my decision making, and they took less than 6 months. Hashtag excited, hashtag let's go shopping, hashtag property investor, and excited Ranjit there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the let's go shopping bit, but Ranjit is such a funny guy. I love Ranjit. And yes, it did take a while to make his mind up. As Luke says, there's people who are entrepreneurs with pensions often don't know what to do with them. They almost sit on the shelf like a dirty puddle or a messy something in the background, or just it's just a pain, I think he called it a pain in the backside, and it is for most people. But in the end, I think with a bit of cajoling on our part and being inside the community, Ranjit, who's just as I said, a lovely guy and makes me laugh every time, and just the way he went, a huge thank you. He's a good guy. So I want to shout out to Ranjit. He knows who he is. And, those people, if you're out there and you've got that little pile of mess of pensions in the background, in the corner, in a drawer, in a cupboard, get them out, have a look, you can be surprised. I was speaking to one of my colleagues just this week, and he said he was talking to someone who said, oh no, I haven't got much. There's £167,000, Chris. We're not talking about tiny, tiny sums of money here. We're talking about money that people just forget, and you can bring that on the table. And Luke has done that in many ways. He's used his pension and created a SSAS, and then turned that SSAS into different ways to connect with people. But then ultimately, he's used it extraordinarily well in his business to generate not just ownership of an asset, but the rental of an asset and the operating of an asset. So he's leveraged his pensions 3 ways in one, 3 ROIs out of 1. You can't do that with conventional pensions, which is why I suppose, I always get excited about pensions and like to talk to people about using them rather than forgetting them and consigning them to that drawer somewhere in a filing cabinet.
Yeah. Well, let's press pause just for a second, Kevin, because I want to let people know a date for their diaries. We have got our next webinar coming up, our live webinar, where we'll be walking through the recurring revenue roadmap and our process that helps our members move from financial insecurity to financial independence. And that date is Wednesday, the 9th of February. So we will be sharing the link for that, but make sure you put that date in your diary now. That'll be in the evening around 7:30 p.m. till around 9 o'clock. So we're looking forward to that, Kevin. We're looking forward to being present, bringing in some of our existing members and just sharing our process so people can really see that on screen. If they've been listening to the podcast, it really helps to see the visuals, to see the roadmap, to bring everything to life.
And to meet us as well, which is just as important because, we forever trying to do our best. And I think Luke did a great job, didn't he, where he said, what are we doing every month to manage and exceed the expectations of our customers? And we're the same, aren't we? And I know you've got that or something similar written on where you operate there down in Wimbledon, Chris. And I'm always impressed with that thought that we obsess, don't we, about trying to help people become financially independent. And some people like to listen and just like Ranjit, consume some stuff on the outside for a little while. But, sometimes it's time for action. And there's no better way to do that than to get an accelerated, journey, to get a shortcut, an intellectual shortcut, a social shortcut that helps you do the job better. And Luke is the same. So I met Luke directly through my connection with Simon Zucchi, who's, the owner of the PIN, Property Investor Network. And he invites me. He's a SaaS client as well, actually, and a very good friend now. And he invites me to speak to his masterminders, usually around month 8, month 9, something like that in their 12 months, just to talk about bringing their pension into play. And just as importantly, learning how to become investable so other people can invest and help you continue your journey. Because most people, certainly in property as an asset, run out of money before they run out of ambition, Chris. And so you've got to learn the skill and master that skill of being able to create a brand that attracts people and then in the end attracts investors. And that's creating IP, which is another asset. And certainly, Hickey House have done that, haven't they? And joint ventures and collaborations, which again is another point of acceleration for Luke. So when you started the intro saying we're talking about property today, I think actually probably Luke has given us an able demonstration of every single pillar in action. All 7 are in action there, from the home capacity at the beginning of his journey to the use of the pension to learning about property. And I'm sure you want to pull out the point about education, Chris, because even though a super successful businessman, he didn't think he knew it all. He took the step to get full-on education. And he said, I got curious enough to say, yeah, there's enough in this for me to want to invest. So he's then gone into the business of creating the brand. He's joint ventured. He's done IP, and he's making investments for others. So while he's not an investor necessarily himself in the market or markets, I think that's 6 pillars he's using, but he's creating a 7th for other people. So really good demonstration of how the pillars work in every conceivable combination. And I think Luke ably demonstrated that today, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And another key element of the wealth building process that we teach is the Wheel of Wealth. And that's step 7 in our 9-step process. We'll be going through that on the webinar on the 9th of February. But the Wheel of Wealth, it begins with education. And interestingly enough, because we talk about the journey taking approximately 5 years on average for people to go from insecurity to independence. And it was back in 2017 that Luke really started on the property journey and turning the wheel for the first time and beginning with that education, which was simply picking up a copy of Simon Zucchi's book, beginning really simple. £10 for the price of a book, but turning that wheel, and it is around about 5 years now, and obviously Luke's, built tremendous wealth and, has done a lot more than turn one wheel, but it all begins with that first wheel turn.
Yeah, it's always about little steps. And I think what you can hear from Luke is, then you asked him the question about where does he see himself, say, in 5 years, and he'd given the vision of the business, which was quite clear, wasn't it? 10,000 units in 10 years. And you can hear his values, so you hear the clarity of his vision and values, but they didn't happen in 2017. He didn't know what he was going to do that. He just knew he had a brain that thought about being a value creator, adding value in the world, and then finding a way to get a reasonable return out of that. And I think that's important to recognize that whatever you've done in the past, if you're building your wealth and you're sat there now, or you're riding or you're walking or running, and you're thinking, well, I haven't done anything. Well, you've always done something that you can bring as leverage to the table. And that's the intellectual leverage. So we talk about leverage, don't we, Chris, on the roadmap, and the financial, intellectual, relation systems and time leverage. And we've definitely got an intellectual leverage being brought, which is that entrepreneur's brain. How do I create value? How do I add value? Building a brand. That's what I want to do because I've built brands. Well, what have you done? Have you been great at customer service? Have you been great at something? Have you been told or patted on the back? Have you had a review? Have you had an award? Or do you know deep down you're just bloody good at some things, and just focus on the things you're good at? And there's a pathway then to use that intellectual leverage to make your wealth go more quickly, more enjoyably, and in the end, more safely. I don't think Luke feels he's at risk, does he? I think, is Luke going to hit 10,000 units in 10 years? Well, it doesn't matter if he does for me, because he's financially independent as a result of that. So that's, he wants to do more, but financial independence is probably way, way ahead of that. And for most people, their vision is an important part of, understanding that, even if it's just get to security first, then aim towards independence. But at the beginning, as we encourage all of our new members, Chris, when they join us, is take the little steps, because when you take steps, you're moving. And when you're moving, the picture changes. And when the picture changes, you meet new people, you see new things, you make new distinctions. And you never know when that one opportunity, when that one idea, when that one relationship is going to make a difference. And that's the fun. And you can hear that. You could hear the curiosity and the fascination in Luke's voice, and you can hear it hopefully in yours and in mine. And if you've got that in yourself, make a decision. Just don't decide whether you're going to join the program or not. That's not the important thing to us. Just decide to show up. Turn up on the webinar. Just come and say hello. Come and see what we do, and just evaluate that. If it's something you want to do, great. If it's something you don't want to do, great. We're happy either way, because we're going to continue to serve you in whichever way we can.
Yeah, and just coming back to Luke's vision there, and we always talk about independence being the target for most people, Kevin, but of course there's 2 levels beyond independence in our model of the 5 levels of wealth. We've got financial insecurity, level 1 at the bottom there, then financial security, which is just making sure you're locking in enough to cover all of your essential outgoings every month. That's the first stage for most people to get to. Then it's independence, which is having enough money to do really whatever you want. So living a life without compromise. But beyond independence is then abundance. And that's when you start not to think about what you need so much, but what you want to do in terms of impact for the world. And you can hear Luke transitioning now into that, can't you, with, his mission of helping other people.
Yes. And, I just love when people get to that. I mean, we've had, apart from Luke this week, I've had 2 other conversations this week. I think one we saw together, didn't we, when we at a meeting this week, Chris, an organization called Cornerstone, really focused on doing their best to help eliminate the problem of homelessness in the UK. That's a big old task, isn't it? Crumbs. But the number of beds, the number of bed nights, the number of things that they're doing, not making profit, to do that, but using some of the profits to do that is just, blows me away. And another gentleman, one of our members, Javier, he's financially independent now, but he doesn't do so for himself. He gives away, so much of his money into things that will lead to charitable things that is important to him. So you can see that the legacy piece is not about family in his case, but it's about the gift that he's leaving to society. And I'm so impressed with him, and I want to support him as well. So, I'm often just enthused by what other people are fascinated by and want to do whatever we can do at Wealth Builders to help support that. So definitely in the homelessness thing, definitely in the empowering, in his case, Javier's case, younger guys and girls in their sort of, who perhaps haven't done as well in education. They've come from poorer backgrounds, and they don't really get a head start in life. And he wants to give them that head start. So I applaud him for that. So whether he's listening or not, we know that our members are doing great things.
Yes, and another example from Luke of his entrepreneurial thinking, and I think this is maybe a Warren Buffett quote, Kevin, you probably can correct me, but it's observe what the masses are doing and then do the opposite. And that's kind of what Luke did with the high street, or has done, is kind of seeing everyone exiting retail and the high street becoming a bit more deserted, and then actually looking at the opportunities there and seeing that people are now wanting local workspace. And that's obviously where he's now moving into.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, you've got to look at the market. I think he said the overheated nature of the market. People, what did he say? They were outbidding the value of the asset way more than it's really worth, and that's one of the dangers of not following the wheel of wealth, isn't it? That, and we heard from Mark Stokes recently, didn't we? Where he said, "You make your money from property." In one of our mastermind sessions, actually, I don't think it was in the podcast, Chris. You make your money in property when you buy the property. And so therefore you have to ruthlessly work backwards from the end to say, right, now I understand all of the ingredients in this property. What can I afford to pay for this property and still make the profit that I want to make? And if the price is more than that, you simply walk away. Yet we see so much evidence out there of people kind of getting emotionally attached to the value of property, or they like the property, or they get frustrated with themselves because they're making offers that are not accepted. So they end up making offers just to get one accepted, which is really not the way to build wealth. And when markets get overheated, you have to think about that. And what Luke has done is thought about that very carefully and said, well, I think there's value here. In the same way, do you remember he said he was talking to his kids originally about what's the gap, and find the gap, or find the niche, as I would call it. And then once you found your niche, be outstanding in your niche. Don't be mediocre in your niche. Don't just do what other people do. You know, that's what kind of happens in work life, doesn't it? Most people get a job and then they're okay in their job, or most people get a business and they're okay in their business. But to be outstanding in your niche, as we aspire to be in ours, is what makes the real difference, because you're focusing continually on adding value. And in Luke's case, you know, if you get a great niche, you get recurring income, and now he's got that well enough established that he's attracting inward investments that's helping him scale, then, you know, that's a recipe for success, you know. So I was always impressed with Luke. I've always enjoyed meeting him, but we meet so many nice people along our journey, Chris, and we hope we'll meet more on the 9th and hopefully get the chance to impact some of those people, just as if we've impacted the life in some small way. Don't take a lot of credit for this, but we are helping Luke, and we continue to want to serve him.
Yes. I'll just correct myself on that quote. It was actually from Earl Nightingale. I just checked that online. So watch what everyone else does, do the opposite. The majority is always wrong, is what he said. And final word then on SaaS, because, you know, for some people, SaaS might be a bit technical, you know, don't obviously fully understand, you know, what a SaaS pension can allow you to do. And Luke went into some detail, but maybe you can just sort of simplify some of the benefits of how Luke has been able to leverage his pension there.
Well, yeah, in simple terms, you know, rather than get technical, because I think the technical nature of anything can put people off, and we don't want people to prejudge it. The whole idea behind SaaS is leverage. It's wealth building in the end, Chris, is always about looking at assets and how to optimize the value and the income stream that flows from those assets. You know, we're always looking at two things. How do you increase value? And how do you increase cash flow? Because that's the two measures, right? Your net worth is increasing and your cash flow that you can spend, the recurring income, is increasing. Now, for most people, their pension is just parked, you know, and the real wealth is being created by the institutions, because they stick a siphon in the pension and say, well, we're going to take 1.5-2% of the value of your money out. And there's nothing you can do about it. And there's nothing you can do to add value. And there's nothing you can do to be creative or to really change your wealth. And we think there's a challenge there. It's not saying it's right for everybody, but for most people, particularly if they become entrepreneurs, they can take control of that pension and say, you know, I don't want to pay those fees. I want to essentially be the legal owner and operator, like a driver of their own vehicle. And then they can take that vehicle and help them on the journey they want to go on. And so many of our clients do that, and obviously with property, and much easier with commercial property than residential properties. Luke talked about very briefly, and so we run masterminds on this. We certainly have videos on that. If anybody wants to watch me talk about SaaS and me talk about how you can use it, we've got lots of free resources. Where would people go to get that kind of thing, Chris, if they want to see them?
Yeah, definitely. Free membership is the best place. So if you're not already on the Wealth Builders mailing list, so you're not getting emails from us with updates of our webinars and our latest episodes, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership, and you can get access to those videos, our ebooks, and lots more free resources inside the free membership area.
Yeah, and just to make a point that in the free membership area, look, I mentioned early on, we obsess about what we do. We give value. All we want from you is an email address, right? So that we can be in contact with you, so that at some point, one of the things I believe is, just like Ranjit, it took him 4 years to make a decision. I'll tease him about that. But in the end, he made a decision. There's always a catalyst, something that needs to nudge you to get you to take action. And by being willing to accept that we might send you some things, but they're always well-intended. They're always trying to drive value so you can do something yourself. And then if necessary, we can help you on certain things. But just accept that we would like an email from you in order to welcome you into our free membership. If you just put your name in there and don't give us your email, I'm afraid we can't welcome you in. It's a fair exchange, I think, for you to give a little of what you've got, for us to give a lot of what we've got. Enough said on that, Chris.
Okay, good. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up everything for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed listening. Hope you learned something new today. And if you enjoyed it and you'd like to just leave a review, maybe we'll give you a shout out in one of the forthcoming episodes. And you can head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/reviews, and that will take you to Google reviews or Trustpilot, and anywhere is good for us, Kevin, isn't it?
Well, it's a constant vindication for us, Chris, that we're on the right track. I mean, if you're like Luke, if you're trying to provide value, you need the feedback to know you're providing it. And the only way we get it is not just our members, who do pay us for the support they get, but they get more than that back to the tune of many, many fold. We know that. But for those who can just say they're liking it, or they're getting an enjoyment from it, or they learn something from it. So take a moment and give a gift of nudging somebody else and say, hey, this is a good podcast, have a listen. Or just post a review. Takes 30 seconds to just do that. So if you could do that, we'd be grateful, and we'll read that out. And one day maybe we'll give some free memberships away, Chris, for good reviewers and so on. But more of that on another day.
Yeah, I tell you what, actually, I just spotted this week, Kevin. I'm not sure how long it's been there, but for our Spotify listeners, you can now rate a podcast on Spotify. So if you are listening on Spotify, just head to the Wealth Talk kind of homepage, or where you would search for that, and just click on the 3 dots, and then that will allow you to rate the podcast. So if you want to give us a rating, that would be really appreciated.
Cool. All right, Chris, thanks for hosting. You did a great job today, and as always, I appreciate that you do all the legwork, and then we work together to sort of pull out the lessons, don't we?
Yeah, all good. Well, we'll catch up same place, same time next week.
Till then, my friend. See ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build, and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.